the story behind the ApoE gene is really interesting. So it's known that ApoE4 allele is the strongest genetic risk factor in late-onset Alzheimer's disease. And the first time it was discovered by the Paycheck Vance and her colleagues. And their original data was mostly Europe. Actually, the original data was almost European descent populations. But later, with expanding the genetic studies in Alzheimer's disease into other populations, studies show that the effect of this gene is showing the variation across the population. It's showing very high risk effect in East Asian and European populations, but the effect was much lower in African descent populations, such as African Americans and Ibadan individuals from Nigeria. So later in 3 independent studies, using the ancestry-aware approach in admixed populations, studies show that the effect of ApoE gene depends on the ancestor background. So we know that in admixed populations, there are more than one ancestor background. For example, in African Americans, they inherited their genetic ancestry from the European and the African ancestors. And this African ancestry is showing the variation across the genome. So some of them may have the African ancestry across the ApoE gene, but some of them may have the European ancestry across the ApoE gene. So as I mentioned before, the studies using this ancestry-aware analysis, they show that, and when we are talking about the ancestry around specific location, we call them local ancestry. So in the average of all this local ancestry in total will give you the global ancestry of an individual. But in the specific location, when we look focusing on that region, it will be a local ancestry. So their studies show that the individual who inherited their ApoE gene with the European local ancestry, showing the higher risk for Alzheimer's disease than individuals inherited their ApoE gene from the African ancestry. So this study, which we have presented in this conference, it's actually a follow-up of these findings. So we follow up the local ancestral region that suggested that at this region there are some protective factors, genetic factors, and likely to be African-specific genetic factors that reduce the effect. They interact with ApoE gene and reduce its effect for getting the Alzheimer's disease. So we use in mixed populations, African Americans. It was around 6,500 African American individuals. And our study showed that there's a locus, which is around 2 megabase next to the ApoE gene. And individuals who inherited their ApoE4 allele with this locus will have the lower risk of AD than who don't. And interestingly, that locus also is African ancestor-specific locus. So its frequency in African descent population around 13%, but in Europeans 0.3%, and it's monomorphic in the East Asian population. By monomorphic, I mean it doesn't exist in East Asian populations. So yeah, so this is the an interesting finding, which suggesting there is an interaction, but we still are looking how they interact. That part is not clear for us. The identification of this kind of natural protective factors is of key importance, because in moving the therapeutic efforts in Alzheimer's disease treatments, it's they may have a big impact. So we are looking now how these two loci, which are next to each other, around 2 megabase apart, interact, and how this new loci, new locus, actually reduce the effect of the ApoE gene. So it can, as I said, it can be very important in terms of the moving the therapeutic efforts and the Alzheimer's disease treatment.